Okay, we're going to be working with lesson 20, writing and evaluating expressions using multiplication and division. So remember, yesterday we did addition and subtraction. So now we're going to do multiplication and division. Example 1. The farmer's market is selling bags of apples. In every bag, there are 3 apples. Complete the table. So we have the table, again, to help us organize the information in our ideas and also to help us see the patterns. For the number of bags will be one title and the other title will be total number of apples. Keep in mind, titles help us to make sure how the information is organized. So in one bag, we have 3 apples. So if we were to continue doing that, I'm just gonna make, a very quick picture here of what it looked like. So that way for people who maybe it's a little visual, it gives them the idea of what a bag looks like. And I'm so sorry that the bags are not very nicely, but try my best. So there's 3 apples in one bag, and we already saw that here. So if we continue with the same pattern, I'm gonna add 3 apples to every bag. I'm just gonna do 3 bags. I think with that you should be able to kind of see the pattern that's happening. So we have 2 bags, we have 3 apples here in the first bag, and another 3 apples. That is going to make it equal to 6 apples. And then if we have 3 bags, add the 3 more, and that's gonna give us the 9 apples. So if I do 4 bags, you probably already noticed that we're gonna have a total of 12 apples. Now, it is important that we not only be able to see it in a visual picture, but that we can actually explain it in symbols. So how did we get the apples? Well, for every bag, we're gonna have 3 apples, so we're gonna multiply that, right? And that's gonna give us a 3. If I have 2 bags, and then I multiply by 3, that's gonna give me 6 apples. If you notice, the same way that we're using symbols, we are getting the answers here. The only difference that in the table, they didn't give you the whole process, but sometimes it's good to write it because it reinforces your thinking and it also helps your brain. So if I do 4 bags, keeping the same pattern of adding 3 apples to every bag, it's gonna be 12 apples. Now we have talked about, what about if I didn't give you a number of bags and I just refer, how can you find the number of apples if you had 100 bags or 200 bags? You don't want to do a table, right? We had discussed that before because it can take you a long time and it might be a lot of work. So here is where you use your expression. And we're going to just review very quickly what we said yesterday. That a variable means the something changes, right? And if we notice here, what is changing is the number of bags. The number of apples that we have depends on the number of bags. So since the number of bags can change, we can represent that with a variable. And we don't even have to worry about selecting a variable because they already gave it to us. They want us to use the variable b. Now they gave you capital letters. We try to stay away from capital letters. Let's do a lower b. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm gonna do lower b here, and then times 3. And if we kind of refer on the previous discussions that we had in previous lessons, we said that we always write 3b, right? Which is the same thing as 3 times b. We always write the coefficient. If you think about what the name of the number is here, we call it coefficient, and then the variable. And those 2 numbers together means times. This is the same thing as this. Okay, this is how we learn that these are 2 equivalent expressions. If you recall in previous lessons, we learned about equivalent expressions because we needed to make sure that we understood how to represent an expression more than one way. Okay, let's continue with the next one. What if the market had 20 bags of apples to sell? Okay, so imagine having a table with 25 bags. That would be forever. But we're gonna use the expression, okay? How many apples is that in all? And I know some of you might be able to do this in your head. So if you can do it in your head, go ahead, but then just confirm it with your expression. We're going to do the expression, and we are going to substitute the variable with the number of bags. They told us that the number of bags, it was going to be 25. So 3 times 25 is going to give us 75 apples. Okay, next problem. If a truck arrived that had some number A, more apples on it, then how many bags will the clerks use to bag up the apples? Now, this is going to be more like reversing, because now they gave you the apples. You got to determine how many bags you need. They didn't tell us how many apples the truck had, right? So we have to determine what do we have to do. This is the reverse thinking that we talked about yesterday, meaning, Eureka teaches you how to think forward, like to understand something, but when you got to think backwards, or do the opposite operation, it teaches you the reverse thinking. So let's pretend that the truck had, let's use a small number just to make sure we understand what we're doing. Let's pretend that the truck had 12 apples, okay? So how would you find out how many bags you need? Let me do the variable here, okay? How will you find that out? You're going to have to think, 3 times what gives me 12? And if some of you have your facts, you can say, 3 times 4. But let's pretend that 12 was a big number and you didn't know how to find the number that you can multiply by 3 to give you 12. Then you would do the opposite operation. What would be the opposite operation? It would be division. So you would divide 12 divided by 3. Why? If you think of the typical division, right, the top numbers are always multiplied to give you the inside. Well, here we were doing the 3, we were doing the 3 times 4 equals 12, right? But this time, we didn't have to find 12. We had to find one number was missing. So it's kind of the reverse thinking. And in order for us to find this number, instead of multiplying, we're going to divide. This is just to help your reasoning, okay? And since we already know that we're going to be using the letter A, we can represent our expression by saying whatever number of apples the truck has, that amount must be divided by 3, because every bag has 3 apples, and that's going to give us how many bags. Next problem. If a truck arrived that had 600 apples on it, how many bags will the clerk use to bag up the apples? Now notice they gave us 600. 600 is a little bigger number. This is why it's always good to use a smaller number like we did here to make sense of your answer. Once you get it, then you can start working with big numbers. Very good. So we can now use the expression that we had over here on the top, A divided by 3. We already know that A equals to 600. And instead of writing A, we're going to write 600 divided by 3. The typical math that we use is 600 divided by 3. And that will give us, just doing it very quickly here, guys, the 200, right? So the answer is, they're asking us how many apples will the clerk use to bag the apples? The answer is 200 bags. Now we got a little messy. We want to circle this. And maybe I am just going to move this one here to this side. And maybe I should erase some of the information that I did so you don't get so confused. This part here, we just use it to make sense of your answer, right? Just gonna erase it so you don't get confused. There we go. Next one, how 1 second. Good. How is part D different from part B? We already said. In one, you're like thinking forward, and the other one, you're thinking backwards. We can just explain that in the first part, which, 1 second. Let's just use the words to make sense. Some people make more sense by writing what they're thinking. So we're gonna say part B it gives you the number of bags and you need to find the number of apples by multiplying by 3. And on part D, let me check. I'm going to change these colors here. Part D, the number of apples is given, and you need to divide by 3 to determine or to find the number of bags needed. Of course, you can always make it a little much simpler, but hopefully this will help you to understand what you did. I'll read it. Part B, it gives you the number of bags, and you need to find the number of apples by multiplying by 3. Part D, the number of apples is given, and you need to divide by 3 to determine the number of bags needed.